The days that followed were a blur of running, hiding, and planning. Claire and Ryan moved from one abandoned building to another, never staying in one place for too long. The Central Authority's forces were relentless, sweeping through the ruins with ruthless efficiency. Every time Claire thought they might finally catch a break, another patrol would appear, forcing them to flee once again. Despite the constant danger, Claire found herself growing stronger. She learned to navigate the ruins with precision, memorizing safe routes and identifying potential threats. She also became more adept at handling weapons, something she'd always avoided before. Ryan taught her how to aim, reload, and stay calm under pressure. Each lesson brought them closer together, their bond deepening with every challenge they faced. One evening, as they huddled in the shadows of an old warehouse, Ryan pulled out a map and spread it across the floor. "This is it," he said, pointing to a location marked with a red X, their main communications hub. "If we can take it out, we'll cripple their ability to coordinate attacks." Claire studied the map carefully, her brow furrowing. "It's heavily guarded," she said. "How? Do you plan to get inside?" Ryan smiled faintly, though his eyes remained serious. "We don't go in guns blazing. We use stealth. Create a distraction, sneak past the guards, and plant explosives. Simple enough if we're careful." "Simple?" Claire echoed, raising an eyebrow. "Nothing about this feels simple." Ryan chuckled softly, his hand brushing against hers. "You're right, but we've made it this far. I think we can handle one last job." Claire nodded reluctantly, knowing there was no turning back now. Whatever happened next, they had to see it through. The night of the operation was cold and moonless, perfect for slipping unnoticed through the darkness. Claire and Ryan approached the communications hub cautiously, sticking to the shadows and avoiding open spaces. The facility loomed ahead of them, its walls lined with armed guards and surveillance cameras. It looked impenetrable, but Ryan had a plan. "This way," he whispered, leading her to a service entrance on the side of the building. The guards changed shifts in 10 minutes. "That's our window." They waited in silence, watching as the guards rotated positions. When the coast was clear, Ryan signaled for Claire to follow him. They slipped through the door quickly, closing it behind them without making a sound. Inside, the air smelled of oil and metal. Rows of servers hummed softly, their lights blinking in rhythmic patterns. Claire felt a pang of unease as she stared at the machines. This was the heart of the Central Authority's power, the system that kept so many people trapped in fear. Destroying it wouldn't solve everything, but it was a start. Ryan handed her a small device packed with explosives. "Take this," he said quietly. "Plant it near the main server cluster. I'll cover you." Claire hesitated, gripping the device tightly. "What if something goes wrong?" "It won't," Ryan assured her, his voice steady. "Just stick to the plan." With a deep breath, Claire moved forward, weaving between the rows of equipment until she reached the target area. Her hands trembled as she set the explosive in place, her mind racing with worst-case scenarios. What if the guards heard her? What if the bomb didn't work? She shook off the thoughts, focusing on the task at hand. As she finished, a shout echoed through the room. One of the guards had spotted them. Ryan immediately sprang into action, firing a few warning shots to draw attention away from Claire. She ducked behind a server rack, clutching the detonator in her hand. "Go!" Ryan yelled, motioning for her. Her to retreat. Claire hesitated, torn between following orders and helping him. But then she remembered his words. Stick to the plan. Summoning every ounce of courage, she ran toward the exit, dodging bullets and shouts as chaos erupted around her. When she reached the door, she turned back for one last look. Ryan was still fighting, holding off the guards to give her time to escape. His face was tense, but he gave her a quick nod, urging her to keep going. Tears blurred her vision as she stepped outside, the weight of what she was leaving behind crushing her chest. She pressed the detonator, bracing herself for the explosion. A deafening blast shook the ground, sending flames and debris spiraling into the night sky. Claire fell to her knees, her body trembling as the reality of what she'd done sank in. Minutes later, Ryan emerged from the wreckage, coughing and covered in ash. Claire rushed to him, throwing her arms around him in relief. "You made it," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I told you I would," Ryan replied, pulling her close. "We did it, Claire." Together. For a moment, they simply held each other, the world around them fading into the background. The mission was complete, but the cost weighed heavily on both of them. So much had been lost: friends, allies, pieces of themselves. Yet, amidst the pain, there was hope. Hope for a better future, one where people could live without fear. As dawn broke over the horizon, painting the ruins in soft golden light, Claire and Ryan began walking toward the edge of the city. They didn't know exactly where they were headed or what awaited them beyond the ruins. But they knew one thing for certain: as long as they stood together, they could face whatever came next. And somewhere, deep in the hearts of those who still dreamed of freedom, a spark ignited. Reminder that even in the darkest times, resistance could light the way forward. The ruins outside the colony stretched endlessly, a labyrinth of broken buildings and twisted metal. Claire and Ryan stumbled through the wreckage, their bodies aching from the fight in the tunnels. Behind them, the sounds of chaos faded into the distant shouts, gunfire, and collapsing debris swallowed by the eerie silence of the wasteland. They didn't stop to rest, knowing the soldiers might still be hunting for them. Claire's mind raced as she followed Ryan, her legs moving on autopilot. She thought about the colonists who had escaped through the tunnels. Were they safe? Had the collapse bought them enough time to get away? And what about Kyle, the young man who had betrayed them? Guilt gnawed at her. He had acted out of fear, not malice, but his decision had almost cost everyone their lives. Ryan glanced back at her, his face pale but determined. "We need to keep moving," he said, his voice low. "They'll regroup soon, and when they do, they'll come after you." Claire nodded, forcing herself to focus. "Where are we going?" "There's a safe house not far from here," Ryan replied. "It's hidden, and my contacts know how to find it. We can lay low there until we figure out our next move." As they pressed on, Claire couldn't help but notice how quiet Ryan had become. His usual confidence seemed shaken, replaced by a grim determination that made her uneasy. Whatever happened next, she realized would change everything for both of them. Hours later, just as dawn began to break, they reached the safe house. It was little more than a crumbling bunker buried beneath layers of rubble, its entrance concealed by overgrown weeds and rusted metal sheets. Ryan pushed aside the debris, revealing a heavy steel door. He knocked 3 times in quick succession. Then twice more a signal, Claire assumed. A moment later, the door creaked open, revealing a woman with sharp features and piercing eyes. She looked Ryan up and down before stepping aside to let them in. "You're late," she said, her tone clipped. "Things got complicated," Ryan muttered, brushing past her. Inside, the bunker was dimly lit, its walls lined with shelves stocked with supplies, canned food, water jugs, medical kits, and weapons. A few other rebels were scattered around, some tinkering with equipment, others cleaning guns. The air smelled faintly of oil and sweat, a reminder of the hard work being done. "Here," the woman gestured for Ryan and Claire to sit. "Start talking," she said, crossing her arms. "What went wrong?" Ryan sighed, running a hand through his hair. The colony was compromised. Someone inside tipped off the Central Authority. "We barely made it out alive." The woman's eyes narrowed. "And the mission? Did you succeed?" "For now," Ryan replied. "The facility is destroyed, and their reinforcements are tied up dealing with the aftermath. But it's only a matter of time before they recover." The woman nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. "Then we'll need to act fast. If they trace this back to us, we're all dead." Claire listened silently, feeling like an outsider in this world of rebellion and danger. These people lived on the edge, risking everything to fight a system that seemed impossible to defeat. She admired their courage, but she also wondered if it was worth the cost. What happens now? She asked finally, breaking the tense silence. The woman turned to her, studying her carefully. "You're Claire, right? Ryan's partner?" Claire hesitated, unsure how to respond. "Yes," she said simply. "Well, Claire, here's the deal," the woman continued. "You've been dragged into something bigger than yourself. Whether you like it or not, you're part of this fight now. So you have two choices: stay and help us, or leave and hope you never cross paths with the Central Authority again." Claire felt her stomach tighten. She wanted to argue, to say she hadn't signed up for any of this. But deep down, she knew the woman was right. "Running wouldn't solve anything, not anymore. I'll stay," Claire said firmly, surprising even herself. The woman raised an eyebrow, but didn't question her decision. Instead, she turned to Ryan. "Good. Then we have work to do." Over the next few days, Claire threw herself into the rebels' efforts. She helped organize supplies, repair equipment, and plan strategies for their next moves. The others treated her with cautious respect, wary of trusting someone new but grateful for her skills. Slowly, she began to feel like part of the team. Ryan stayed by her side, guiding her through the complexities of the rebellion. He explained their goals, their methods, and the risks they faced. Despite everything, Claire found herself growing closer to him. Their shared struggles forged a bond neither of them could ignore, a connection that went beyond survival. One evening, as they sat together in the corner of the bunker, Claire finally voiced a question that had been weighing on her mind. "Do you ever wonder if it's worth it?" she asked softly. "All this fighting, does it really make a difference?" Ryan looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "Sometimes," he admitted, "there are days when I think we're just delaying the inevitable, that no matter what we do, the Central Authority will always win." Claire nodded, understanding exactly how he felt. "So why keep going?" "Because giving up means letting them win," Ryan said, his voice steady. "And as long as there's even a small chance we can create a better future, I'll take it. For me, for you, for everyone who deserves more than this." His words struck a chord in Claire, filling her with a mix of hope and resolve. She realized then that this wasn't just about survival. It was about creating a world where people didn't have to live in fear, where colonies like hers could thrive without constantly looking over their shoulders. But their respite was short-lived. One night, as the rebels prepared for another operation, alarms blared throughout the bunker. Someone shouted about intruders closing in. Panic spread quickly, and the group scrambled to defend themselves. Ryan grabbed Claire's arm, pulling her toward the exit. "We need to go," he urged. "Now." "What about the others?" she demanded, glancing back at the chaos unfolding behind them. "They'll hold them off," Ryan said grimly. "Our job is to get out and keep the mission alive." Claire hesitated, torn between loyalty to the rebels and the need to survive. Finally, she nodded, following Ryan into the darkness. Outside, the ruins were eerily quiet, the calm before the storm. Ryan led her through narrow alleys and abandoned streets, his movements swift and deliberate. Every step felt heavier than the last, exhaustion threatening to overwhelm her. Still, she pushed forward, driven by a newfound sense of purpose. When they finally stopped to catch their breath, Ryan turned to her, his face etched with emotion. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for dragging you into this." Claire shook her head, meeting his gaze. "You didn't drag me. I chose this. Just like I choose to stay." Ryan smiled faintly, reaching out to take her hand. "Then we'll see it through together." As they stood there, surrounded by the remnants of a broken world, Claire felt a spark of hope ignite within her. The road ahead would be dangerous, filled with challenges neither of them could predict. But for the first time in a long time, she believed they might actually have a chance, and as long as they had each other, she knew they could face whatever came next. The explosion at the facility echoed through the colony, shaking the ground beneath their feet. Panic spread quickly among the residents as alarms blared in the distance. Claire and Ryan stood just inside the gates, catching their breath while trying to make sense of the chaos. People rushed around, shouting questions and pointing toward the horizon where flames lit up the night sky. "What have you done?" one of the colonists demanded, glaring at Ryan. "You said you could handle it." Ryan raised his hands defensively, but Claire stepped forward before he could respond. "We had no choice," she said firmly. "They were coming for us. This was the only way to stop them." Her words didn't seem to calm anyone. The crowd murmured uneasily, some nodding in agreement while others looked skeptical. A few even muttered about betrayal, accusing Ryan of bringing danger to their doorstep. Claire clenched her fists, frustration bubbling inside her. She knew they wouldn't understand, not fully, but she couldn't let fear tear them apart. "We need to prepare," she continued, raising her voice to be heard over the noise. "If they come here looking for answers, we need to be ready." The leader of the colony pushed through the crowd, his face pale but resolute. "Claire's right," he said. "Whatever happens next, we stick together. Start securing the perimeter and gather everyone indoors. No one goes outside unless absolutely necessary." With reluctant nods, the colonists dispersed to follow. "His orders!" Claire turned to Ryan, who was still catching his breath. His expression was grim, but there was a flicker of determination in his eyes. "It's not over yet," he said quietly. "They'll send reinforcements. And when they do, they won't hold back." Claire nodded, her heart heavy with dread. "Then we'll fight. For now, though, we need to keep everyone safe." The hours that followed were tense and exhausting. Guards patrolled the walls, keeping watch for any sign of approaching enemies. Inside the colony, people huddled in communal spaces, too afraid to sleep. Children cried softly, comforted by their parents, while elders whispered prayers under their breath. Claire moved among them, offering reassurance and helping wherever she could. But she couldn't shake the guilt weighing on her shoulders. This was her decision, her gamble, and now the entire colony was paying the price. By morning, the initial panic had settled into a restless unease. Smoke from the destroyed facilities still stained the sky, a constant reminder of what had happened. Claire found Ryan near the gate, scanning the horizon with binoculars. He looked tired but alert, his jaw tight with tension. "Anything?" she asked, joining him. He shook his head. "Not yet. But they're out there, waiting." Claire crossed her arms, feeling a chill despite the rising sun. "What happens if they find us?" Ryan lowered the binoculars and turned to face her. "We'll hold them off as long as we can." "But if things go badly?" He hesitated, searching for the right words. "If things go badly, I want you to promise me something." "What?" "Promise me you'll get out alive," he said, his voice steady but laced with emotion. "Take whoever you can and run. Don't let them take you." Claire stared at him, anger flaring in her chest. "No, I'm not leaving. Not again." "This isn't about pride," Ryan insisted. "It's about survival. If they capture you or worse, they'll use you to control the others. You're stronger than you think, Claire. Stronger than all of us. Promise me you'll lead them somewhere safe." For a moment, Claire didn't respond. She wanted to argue, to tell him she wasn't going anywhere without him, but deep down, she knew he was right. If the worst happened, someone would need to ensure the colony's survival, even if it meant sacrificing everything else. "I'll think about it," she said finally, avoiding his gaze. Ryan sighed but didn't push further. They both knew time was running out. Later that day, betrayal struck from within. As Claire helped distribute food rations to the gathered colonists, a young man named Kyle approached her nervously. He glanced around to make sure no one was listening before speaking. "I need to talk to you," he whispered. "It's important." Claire frowned, gesturing for him to follow her to a quieter corner. "What is it?" Kyle hesitated, wringing his hands. I told them," he admitted, his voice trembling. "I contacted the Central Authority last night. I thought it would protect us, I thought they'd leave us alone if we handed Ryan over. Claire felt like the ground had been ripped out from under her. You did what? She demanded, her voice rising. I'm sorry. Kyle stammered, tears welling up in his eyes. I didn't know they'd attack the colony. I swear, I just wanted to keep everyone safe. Before Claire could respond, shouts erupted from the gate. Guards ran past her, weapons drawn, as the sound of engines roared in the distance. Through the haze, she saw vehicles speeding toward them, armored trucks filled with armed soldiers. Her blood ran cold. Get everyone inside! She yelled, grabbing Kyle by the arm. Now! Chaos erupted as the soldiers breached the gates, firing warning shots into the air. Colonists scattered, screaming and scrambling for cover. Claire shoved Kyle toward the nearest building, then turned to search for Ryan. She spotted him near the generator room, already engaging the enemy with makeshift weapons scavenged from the workshop. Fall back, she shouted, running toward him. We can't win this. Ryan shook his head, his face streaked with dirt and sweat. We can buy time. Get the others out while I hold them off. No, Claire snapped, grabbing his arm. We do this together or not at all. Reluctantly, Ryan followed her as they retreated deeper into the colony. Behind them, the soldiers advanced, methodically clearing each structure. Claire's mind raced, trying to come up with a plan. There had to be a way out, a hidden exit, or an escape route they hadn't considered. As they regrouped with the remaining colonists in the main hall, Ryan stepped forward, addressing the terrified crowd. Listen to me, he said, his voice cutting through the panic. There's a tunnel system beneath the colony. It leads to the outskirts of the ruins. If we move fast, we can lose them. Some of the colonists nodded, hope flickering in their eyes. Others looked doubtful, unsure if they could trust Ryan after everything that had happened. Claire stepped up beside him, meeting their gazes one by one. He's telling the truth, she said firmly. This is our only chance. Grab whatever supplies you can carry and follow us. Stay quiet and stay close. With no other options, the group began moving toward the tunnels. Ryan led the way, using a map etched onto a scrap of paper to guide them. The passage was narrow and dark, the air thick with dampness and decay. Children whimpered softly, clinging to their parents, while older colonists struggled to keep up. Claire stayed near the back, urging stragglers along and keeping an ear out for signs of pursuit. Behind them, the sounds of destruction grew louder. The soldiers had discovered the tunnels and were following close behind. Ryan glanced over his shoulder, his expression grim. We're not going to outrun them, he muttered. Claire grabbed his arm, forcing him to meet her gaze. Then we'll slow them down. Together. Ryan hesitated, then nodded. All right, let's finish this. At the next fork in the tunnel, they split the group. Most of the colonists continued ahead, guided by volunteers who knew the layout. Claire and Ryan stayed behind, setting traps and blockades to delay the soldiers. It was risky, dangerous, but they both knew it was the only way to give the others a fighting chance. When the first wave of soldiers reached them, Claire and Ryan fought back with everything they had. Crude weapons clashed against polished steel, desperation fueling every strike. For a moment, it seemed like they might actually hold their ground. But then a soldier lunged at Claire, knocking her to the ground. Claire! Ryan shouted, rushing to her side. He managed to fend off the attacker, pulling her to her feet just as more soldiers closed in. Surrounded and outnumbered, they raised their hands in surrender. One of the soldiers stepped forward, his face hidden behind a mask. You've caused enough trouble, he growled. Now it's time to pay. But before he could act, a deafening roar echoed through the tunnel. The ground shook violently, throwing everyone off balance. Dust and debris rained down from above, sealing off the passage behind them. In the confusion, Claire and Ryan seized the opportunity to slip away, disappearing into the shadows as they emerged into the ruins. Battered but alive, Claire turned to Ryan, her voice barely audible over the ringing in her ears. What was that? Ryan smiled faintly, exhaustion etched across his face. Back up. Looks like my friends decided to show up after all. For the first time in days, Claire allowed herself a small smile. Whatever came next, they weren't alone anymore. The days following the wedding passed in a blur for Claire. Life in the colony carried on as usual, but beneath the surface, tension simmered. People went about their routines tending to crops, repairing equipment, and caring for children, but whispers of doubt lingered in the air. Some colonists questioned why Claire had married Ryan so suddenly, while others wondered if his presence was truly beneficial or if he brought danger with him. Claire tried to ignore the gossip, focusing instead on keeping the colony running smoothly. But it wasn't easy. Every time she saw Ryan, she felt a mix of guilt and frustration. The marriage was supposed to be a practical arrangement, nothing more. Yet, as they worked side by side, she found herself noticing small things about him. The way he smiled when he fixed something difficult, the quiet determination in his voice when he talked about his cause. It made her question whether she'd done the right thing. Ryan, for his part, seemed genuinely committed to helping. He spent hours repairing machinery, teaching others how to maintain it, and even suggesting improvements to make the colony more efficient. His efforts earned him respect from many, though a few still eyed him with suspicion. Claire appreciated his dedication, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, an inevitable storm they couldn't avoid. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Claire and Ryan were alone in the generator room. They'd been troubleshooting an issue with the power supply, and the hum of the machine filled the silence between them. Finally, Ryan broke the quiet. "We need to talk," he said. His tone serious. Claire looked up from the control panel. "What is it?" Ryan hesitated, glancing toward the door to ensure no one was listening. "I got a message earlier from my contacts." Claire's stomach tightened. "And?" "They know we're here," Ryan said, his voice low. "Agents from the Central Authority are planning a raid. They suspect there's rebel activity in this area." Claire's heart sank. "How do they know? Did someone tell them?" "I don't think so," Ryan replied quickly. "It's probably just routine surveillance. But either way, we don't have much time. If they find us, they'll destroy everything. The colony, our plans, everything." Claire leaned against the wall, her mind racing. This was exactly what she'd feared. Involving Ryan meant putting everyone at risk. And now her worst nightmare was becoming reality. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ryan stepped closer, his expression grim. "We stick to the plan. Sabotage their operations before they can act. There's a key facility nearby where they store supplies and equipment. If we disable it, they'll have to divert resources to fix it, buying us time." Claire shook her head, panic rising in her chest. "That's too dangerous. What if we get caught?" "We won't," Ryan said firmly. "Not if we're careful. I've done this kind of thing before. Trust me. Trust him." Those words echoed in Claire's mind. She wanted to believe him, but fear held her back. How could she trust someone who had already lied to her once? Why does it always have to be sabotage? She snapped, her frustration spilling out. "Can't we just leave? Let them come and find nothing here?" Ryan sighed, rubbing his temples. "Because running won't solve anything. They'll keep hunting us, destroying every colony they think might harbor rebels. We have to fight back, Claire. For ourselves and for everyone else who's suffering under their rule." Claire stared at him, torn between anger and resignation. He was right, as much as she hated to admit it. Running wouldn't save them, but fighting meant risking everything. "Fine," she said finally. "What's the plan?" Ryan explained quickly, sketching out a rough map on a scrap of paper. The facility was heavily guarded, but there was a weak point in its perimeter, a spot where the fence was partially damaged. If they timed it right, they could slip in unnoticed, plant explosives, and escape before anyone realized what had happened. "Has to be tonight," Ryan added, "before they move against us." Claire nodded, dread pooling in her stomach. All right, let's do it. As darkness fell over the colony, Claire and Ryan prepared to leave. They packed light just enough. Tools and supplies to get the job done. Claire double-checked the explosives Ryan had assembled, making sure they were secure in her bag. Her hands trembled slightly, but she forced herself to focus. This wasn't the time to fall apart. Before heading out, they stopped by the main hall to speak with the colony's leader. Ryan insisted on telling him the truth, not all of it, but enough to explain why they needed volunteers to stay alert overnight. There's a chance we might be attacked, Ryan said, choosing his words carefully. If anything happens, sound the alarm and prepare for evacuation. The leader frowned, clearly uneasy. Are you sure about this? Shouldn't we send scouts instead? No time, Ryan replied. Just trust us. We'll handle it. Reluctantly, the leader agreed, though his eyes lingered on Claire as if silently asking if she was okay with this. She gave him a small nod, hoping it looked more confident than she felt. Once outside the gates, Claire and Ryan moved quickly, sticking to the shadows. The journey to the facility took longer than expected, each step feeling heavier than the last. Claire kept glancing over her shoulder, half expecting guards to appear out of nowhere. But the ruins remained eerily silent, broken only by the occasional gust of wind. When they reached the facility, Ryan led them to the damaged section of the fence. He pulled out a pair of wire cutters and began working on the barrier, his movements swift and precise. Within minutes, they were inside. The facility was larger than Claire had imagined, its towering walls lined with crates and machinery. Guards patrolled the grounds, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Ryan motioned for her to stay, low as they crept forward, avoiding detection. This way, he whispered, guiding her toward a storage unit marked with symbols indicating fuel reserves. If we hit this, it'll take them weeks to recover. Claire nodded, setting down her bag. Together, they planted the explosives, making sure they were positioned to cause maximum damage without risking immediate collapse. As they worked, Claire's mind raced. What if something went wrong? What if they didn't make it out in time? Ready? Ryan asked, snapping her back to reality. She swallowed hard and nodded. Let's go. They retraced their steps, moving faster now that the explosives were set. Just as they reached the fence, a loud explosion rocked the night, followed by shouts and the blaring of alarms. Bright lights flooded the area, illuminating the chaos. Run! Ryan shouted, grabbing Claire's hand. They sprinted through the ruins, hearts pounding, as the sound of pursuit grew louder behind them. Claire stumbled once, scraping her knee, but Ryan pulled her up and urged her onward. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached the safety of the colony's gates. Gasping for breath, Claire collapsed against the wall, her legs trembling. Ryan knelt beside her, his face pale but determined. It worked, he said, his voice barely audible over the ringing in their ears. We did it! But Claire couldn't celebrate. All she could think about was the cost of lives disrupted. The risks taken, the fragile peace shattered. As she looked at Ryan, she realized something had shifted between them. Whether it was trust, admiration, or something deeper, she couldn't say. But one thing was certain. Whatever came next, they would face it together or not at all. The next few days were tense for Claire. Every time she saw Ryan, her mind replayed the image of him hunched over the control panel in the middle of the night. What had he been doing? And why did he feel the need to lie about it? She wanted to confront him again, but she didn't have enough evidence to accuse him outright. Instead, she kept a close eye on him, watching his every move. Ryan seemed to sense her suspicion. He avoided being alone with her and stayed busy helping around the colony. People praised him for his work, saying how lucky they were to have someone with his skills. Claire forced herself to smile along, but inside, she felt uneasy. Something wasn't right, and she couldn't shake the feeling that trouble was brewing. One evening, after a long day of repairs, Claire found Ryan sitting by himself near the edge of the colony. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. You were staring at the horizon, lost in thought. For a moment, Claire considered walking away, but curiosity got the better of her. She approached him slowly, making sure he heard her footsteps so she wouldn't startle him. "Mind if I join you?" she asked. Ryan glanced up, surprised to see her. "Sure," he said, scooting over to make room. They sat in silence for a while, the only sound coming from the wind rustling through the makeshift barrier surrounding the colony. Claire took a deep breath, trying to figure out how to start the conversation. Finally, she spoke. "You've been here almost a week now," she began, "and you've done a lot to help us." "Everyone appreciates it," Ryan nodded. "I'm just glad I can contribute. You've all been really kind to let me stay." Claire hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "But there's still stuff I don't understand about you, like where you came from, or why you were out in the ruins alone." Ryan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I get it. You don't trust me. And honestly, I don't blame you." He paused, as if debating whether to say more. Then, looking directly at her, he continued. "I wasn't completely honest before. I didn't just leave the outer zones because life there was hard. I came here because I'm part of something bigger, a group, working to fight against the Central Authority." Claire's eyes widened. "What do you mean, Central Authority?" "The people who control the remaining habitable zones," Ryan explained. "They hoard resources, keep everyone else struggling, and crush anyone who tries to resist. My group, we're trying to change that. We're gathering allies, finding places we can use strategically to weaken their grip." Claire stared at him, her mind racing. She'd heard rumors about rebels fighting against the regime, but she'd never imagined meeting one in person. "And you think our colony is strategic?" Ryan nodded. "It's isolated, which makes it harder for them to monitor. Plus, your location gives us access to key supply lines. If we can set up operations here, it could make a real difference." Claire felt a mix of anger and fear bubbling inside her. "You dragged us into this without even asking? Do you have any idea what could happen if they find out?" "I know it's risky," Ryan admitted. "But I also know that doing nothing isn't an option. If we don't stand up to them, things will only get worse. Please, Claire, I need your help." She looked away, torn between her loyalty to the colony and the growing realization that Ryan might be right. Life under the Central Authority was unbearable, and their colony was barely surviving as it was. But getting involved in rebellion? That was a death sentence if they got caught. "What exactly does helping you entail?" she asked finally. Ryan leaned forward, his voice low. "For starters, I need to stay here longer, legally, if they suspect. I'm just passing through, they'll investigate. But if I'm officially part of the colony, like married to someone, it would give me legal status. No one would question my presence." Claire blinked, stunned. "Married? Are you serious?" "It's the only way," Ryan said earnestly. "I wouldn't ask unless it was absolutely necessary." Claire stood abruptly, pacing back and forth. The idea of marrying someone she barely trusted felt absurd, and yet she couldn't deny that Ryan's plan made sense. If he stayed, the colony might benefit from whatever resources or support his group could provide. On the other hand, if she refused, the consequences could be catastrophic, not just for Ryan, but for everyone. "This is insane," she muttered, stopping in front of him. "You're asking me to risk everything for what? A chance at freedom?" Ryan stood too, meeting her gaze. "For hope," he said simply. "We're running out of time, Claire. Either we fight back or we let them win." She looked into his eyes, searching for any hint of deception. All she saw was sincerity and desperation. Slowly, reluctantly, she nodded. "All right," she said. "I'll do it. But if this goes south, it's on you." Ryan exhaled, relief washing over his face. "Thank you. You won't regret this." As they walked back toward the colony, Claire couldn't shake the weight of what she'd agreed to. Marrying Ryan wasn't just a favor. It was a gamble, one that could save them all, or destroy everything they'd worked so hard to build. And, deep down, she wasn't sure which outcome was more likely. Over the next few days, preparations for the wedding began. News spread quickly through the colony, and while most people were happy for Claire, some whispered behind her back. They wondered why she'd chosen Ryan, a stranger, over someone from within the community. Claire ignored the gossip, focusing instead on the task at hand. On the morning of the ceremony, Claire stood in front of a cracked mirror, adjusting the simple dress she borrowed from a neighbor. It wasn't much, but it was clean and fit well enough. She tried to remind herself that this wasn't real, that it was just a means to an end. Still, her hands trembled as she smoothed the fabric. When she stepped outside, Ryan was waiting. For her, he wore a patched-up suit jacket and a nervous smile. As they walked to the makeshift altar, Claire couldn't help noticing how quiet the crowd was. Everyone seemed to sense that this wasn't an ordinary celebration. The ceremony itself was short and simple, conducted by one of the colony's elders. When it came time to exchange vows, Claire spoke softly, repeating the words without really hearing them. Ryan, on the other hand, sounded sincere. His voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. As the ceremony ended and the crowd dispersed, Claire turned to Ryan. "This doesn't change anything," she said firmly. "We're doing this for the colony, not for us." Ryan nodded, understanding. "I know, but thank you anyway." Later that night, as Claire lay in bed, she stared at the ceiling, her mind racing. She'd made a deal with Ryan, but she couldn't shake the feeling that their problems were only beginning. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain: life in the colony would never be the same again. The next morning, Claire woke up earlier than usual. The colony was quiet, the kind of quiet that came before everyone started their day. She lay in her small cot for a moment, staring at the cracked ceiling above her. Her mind kept drifting. Back to Ryan. Who was he really? And why had he been so far out in the ruins? Something about him didn't add up, but she couldn't put her finger on it. After getting dressed, Claire headed to the infirmary. Ryan was sitting on the edge of a cot, looking much better than he had the night before. His cuts had been cleaned and bandaged, and his legs seemed to be healing well. He looked up as she entered, giving her a small smile. "Morning," he said. "I wanted to thank you again for helping me." Claire nodded but stayed cautious. "You're welcome, but I still don't know much about you. Where are you from?" Ryan hesitated, his eyes flickering away for a second. "I'm from one of the outer zones. It's not easy to live there, so I decided to leave." Claire crossed her arms. "Why come here?" "Most people avoid this place unless they have no other choice." Ryan shrugged, trying to act casual. "I heard rumors about your colony, that you managed to survive without too much trouble. I figured maybe I could find a fresh start here." His story sounded plausible enough, but Claire wasn't convinced. There was something guarded in the way he spoke, like he was holding back. Still, she didn't press him further. For now, he was just another person seeking refuge, and the colony had rules about taking in strangers. As long as he followed those rules, she couldn't kick him out. Over the next few days, Ryan proved himself useful. He had a knack for fixing things, especially machinery. The colony's generator, which had been sputtering and threatening to break down, roared back to life after he tinkered with it. People began to notice his skills, and soon he was helping with repairs all over the settlement. Claire found herself working alongside him more often than not. Despite her initial suspicions, she had to admit he was good at what he did and surprisingly easy to talk to. But even as Ryan gained the trust of others, Claire remained wary. She noticed little things about him that didn't quite fit. For one, his hands were calloused in ways that suggested years of working with tools. Yet his face didn't show the wear and tear of someone who'd spent a lifetime in the harsh conditions of the outer zones. And then there were the nights when she caught him staring at old photographs pinned to the walls of the communal hall. They were pictures of cities before the collapse, gleaming skyscrapers, bustling streets, parks filled with greenery. Ryan would stand there for minutes at a time, lost in thought. One evening, while they were both working late in the generator room, Claire finally decided to ask him about it. "Why do you keep looking at those photos?" she said, keeping her tone casual. Ryan glanced at her, startled. "What photos?" "The ones of the old world. You always seem interested in them." He hesitated, his wrench pausing mid-turn. "I guess I'm just curious. I never got to see any of that stuff myself." It's hard to imagine what life was like back then. Claire studied him closely. His answer made sense, but it didn't feel entirely honest. Before she could say anything else, he changed the subject. "So how long have you lived here?" he asked, turning back to the generator. "Almost 10 years, Claire replied, deciding to let it go for now. "This place has been my home since I was a kid," Ryan nodded, focusing on his work. "It's impressive what you've built here. Not many colonies can last this long." They worked in silence for a while, the hum of the generator filling the space between them. Claire couldn't shake the feeling that Ryan was hiding something big. But what? A few days later, strange things started happening around the colony. Small issues at first, a power outage here, a water pump malfunctioning there. At first, no one thought much of it. Equipment broke down all the time, especially given how old most of it was. But then the problems became more frequent, almost like someone or something was deliberately sabotaging things. Rumors began to spread among the colonists. Some whispered about outsiders bringing bad luck. Others blamed faulty parts or poor maintenance. Claire tried to stay calm, reminding herself that coincidences happen. Still, she couldn't help noticing that the trouble seemed to coincide with Ryan's arrival. One night, unable to sleep, Claire wandered through the colony. The streets were empty, except for a few guards patrolling the perimeter. As she passed the generator room, she heard faint voices coming from inside. Curious, she crept closer and peeked through the partially open door. Ryan was there, hunched over a control panel with a handheld device in his hand. His face was illuminated by the soft glow of the screen, and he was muttering to himself. Claire's heart skipped a beat. What was he doing? She stepped into the room, making sure her footsteps were loud enough to alert him. Ryan spun around, startled, quickly shoving the device into his pocket. "What are you doing?" Claire demanded, her voice sharp. Ryan raised his hands defensively. "Whoa, relax. I was just checking the system. There's been some weird fluctuations lately, and I wanted to make sure everything was stable." Claire narrowed her eyes. "At midnight? Alone?" "I couldn't sleep," he said quickly, "and I figured it wouldn't hurt to double-check." She stared at him, searching for any sign of deception. His expression was calm, but there was a tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there before. Claire didn't believe him, not completely, but she also didn't have proof of anything. "Fine," she said finally. "But if I catch you sneaking around like this again, I'll report you." Ryan nodded, looking relieved. "Understood. Thanks for understanding." As Claire walked away, her mind raced. Whatever Ryan was hiding, it was bigger than she'd imagined. And if she didn't figure it out soon, it might already be too late. The sun was a dull orange smear in the sky, barely visible through the thick haze that blanketed what used to be New York City. The air smelled of rust and decay, a constant reminder of how much the world had changed. Claire Monroe tightened, her grip on the toolbox slung over her shoulder as she stepped carefully over the jagged remains of a collapsed building. Her boots crunched against shards of glass and concrete, each step echoing in the eerie silence. Claire wasn't supposed to be out here alone. Scavenging missions were usually done in pairs for safety, but the colony's resources were stretched thin, and everyone else was busy keeping things running back home. The generators needed parts that could only be found in the ruins, outside their walls. If they didn't fix the water filtration system soon, the entire colony would run out of clean drinking water. So despite the risks, Claire volunteered to go. She paused for a moment, scanning the horizon. The city looked like a graveyard now, its towering skyscrapers reduced to skeletal frames jutting out of the ground. Nature had begun reclaiming the land, with vines creeping up broken walls and weeds sprouting between cracks in the pavement. It was beautiful in a haunting sort of way, but Claire didn't have time to admire it. She checked her map one more time, squinting at the faded markings. According to the notes left by previous scavengers, there was an old maintenance facility nearby that might still have usable components. As she moved forward, Claire's hand instinctively hovered near the holster at her side. Weapons were rare these days, but every scavenger carried at least a knife or a small firearm. You never knew what you might encounter out here. Wild animals, desperate survivors, or worse raiders who saw others as nothing more than targets. Claire tried not to think about it too much. Fear wouldn't help her get the job done. It was when she rounded the corner of a crumbling structure that she saw, or rather, heard him first. A low groan, followed by the sound of something heavy hitting the ground. Claire froze, her heart pounding in her chest. Slowly, she pulled her gun from its holster and crept toward the noise. Peering around the edge of the wall, she spotted a figure lying on the ground, half buried under a pile of debris. He was alive at least. She thought he was. His breathing was shallow, and his clothes were torn and dirty, but he didn't look injured beyond some cuts and bruises. "Hey," Claire called out cautiously, keeping her weapon trained on him. "Are you okay?" The man stirred, blinking up at her through bloodshot eyes. For a moment, he just stared, as if unsure whether she was real. Then, with obvious effort, he pushed himself into a sitting position. You're human," he rasped, his voice hoarse. Claire frowned. "Of course I'm human. What did you expect?" She lowered her gun slightly but stayed alert. Something about this guy felt off. Who was he? And why was he out here all alone? "My name's Ryan," he said after a long pause. Ryan Carter. He held up his hand slowly, showing he wasn't armed. "I swear I'm not dangerous." Claire hesitated. Most people avoided venturing this far into the ruins unless they absolutely had to. This Ryan didn't look like a typical scavenger. He wasn't carrying any tools or supplies, and his clothing was too clean to belong to someone who'd been living rough for long. Still, leaving him here to die didn't sit right with her. "Are you doing out here?" she asked, keeping her tone neutral. Ryan glanced around nervously before answering. "I was trying to find shelter. Got caught in a collapse earlier today. Been wandering ever since." Claire studied him for a moment, longer than sighed. "All right, fine. But you're coming with me. And if you try anything funny, I won't hesitate to shoot." Ryan nodded quickly, relief washing over his face. "Thank you," he murmured. "You won't regret this." They started walking back toward the colony, Claire leading the way while keeping a close eye on Ryan. He limped slightly, favoring his left leg, but otherwise seemed capable enough. As they walked, Claire couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to his story than he was letting on. Why had he been so surprised to see her? And where had he come from? The outer zones were practically uninhabitable, filled with toxic waste and radiation. No sane person would willingly go there or leave it. For that matter, when they finally reached the gates of the colony, Claire signaled for the guards to let them in. The sight of Ryan raised a few eyebrows, but no one questioned her decision. Inside, the colony buzzed with activity. People hurried between makeshift buildings, tending to crops grown in hydroponic tanks or repairing equipment salvaged from the ruins. It was a hard life, but it was better than being out there. Claire brought Ryan to the infirmary, where a medic patched him up. While he rested, she filed a quick report with the colony's leader, explaining how she'd found him. She didn't mention her suspicions, not yet. For now, Ryan was just another refugee seeking safety. But Claire made a mental note to keep an eye on him. Something told her that his arrival was going to change things, whether she liked it or not. And deep down, she couldn't decide if that was a good thing or a bad one.